for joining us for another edition of Divorce Today on DadsDivorce.com. Today joining us we have Ann Ahrens, and she's a marriage and family therapist based out of Riverside, California. And so today we're going to kind of talk about a subject that is pretty important from what we understand based on the forums and everything. We're going to talk a little bit more about second marriages and how to make second marriages work, especially after a failed marriage and trying to get it right the second time. So, Luann, thanks for joining us today.
Well, you're welcome. I'm delighted to be here.
So first off, just tell me a little bit more about your background and how you got into the therapy, how you got into specializing in marriage and family therapy.
Well, I think I'm like a lot of people that have ended up in the same career field that I'm in. It's something that I've been doing my whole life. Something even when I was a little girl, it seemed like I would seek out little friends that were sad or disappointed or didn't feel real good about themselves, and I always wanted to encourage them and help them along. And so it's something that I've done forever. And when I got to graduate school, I thought that was something that was really unique about me, and found out that most of the people in my class were like that as well. So I think it's pretty typical among therapists that we just sort of have a bent toward wanting to have an impact on other people and be able to help people improve their lives, and that has just continued. The first real bite, though, for me came not long after I was out of my undergraduate work. That degree was not even in a field really related to what I'm doing now. But I got a job hired as the director of an in-house play program, working with hospitalized children and helping them to adjust to the hospitalization experience that they were going through. And what I found there was, while I was working with the children, and part of my responsibility was training volunteers to work with the children, what I began to find was that I loved working with the parents and helping them through the experience they were going through. And in that experience, I had an observation that about half of the families that came in left that kind of an experience intact, meaning about half of the families dissolved because they had a really ill child, because a lot of the children were hospitalized because of cardiology problems or oncology issues, those kinds of things, so they were pretty severe. And I began really asking questions then about why. How come some couples could make it and other couples couldn't? And that has kind of been a lifelong question, partly what got me specifically into marriage and family therapy, because I am still asking those kind of questions, and my specialty now is couples. I spend a lot of time training, going to seminars, workshops, reading, what have you, trying to gather information about what helps couples stay together, because I don't think our society really helps people stay together anymore. I think we're really good at helping people break up, but not really good at helping them stay together long term.
Okay. So that actually is it's a good segue into what we're going to just talk about a little bit today. One of the first things I wanted to ask you about are, what are some of the most important steps that someone can take to ensure that their next marriage is successful?
A lot of times when people leave a marriage, their focus isn't on so much on what was their role in that, as much as it is, I want to make my life better and I want to have a life partner, and they'll jump into a relationship without really stopping to think about what made that first marriage not work. And so one of the first steps that I always encourage people is to do some work on yourself, whether it's with another therapist, whether it's reading, whether it's going to workshops or something like that. A lot of churches, by the way, have programs, divorce recovery type programs, and that's another place that people can look. But working on yourself and trying to understand what your role was, because it takes two people to make a marriage work. And each person usually has played a role in why the relationship didn't work. That's not always the case, because sometimes you'll have a spouse with a full-blown addiction or ongoing affairs or those kinds of things, and that can be a little bit of a different problem. But I think the starting point always is looking at yourself and being willing to be teachable and look for ways to improve yourself and to look at your own issues.
Okay. And how do you, or when do you know if you're ready to take that next step and move on to another marriage or another serious relationship?
I would say when that old relationship doesn't keep coming back and biting you. And what I mean by that is you really know you've moved on when you can think about that other relationship and you don't get those little stabs in your gut, so to speak, that you've gotten so long. When those stabs aren't coming anymore, you know you've really processed and that you're at a much healthier place.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about how marriage therapy works, you know, and especially focusing on second marriages, whether it be marital counseling after the fact or premarital counseling in general.
Well, to begin with, fit is everything. And what I mean by that is it's really important to find a therapist that you connect with. If you set up a relationship with a therapist that maybe you don't like their style or you think they're a little odd, you just aren't going to get anything out of the therapy. You need to find somebody you really can relate to, that on some level you see as a human that cares about you and wants to see you progress. So fit is everything, and I like to encourage clients to even do a consult. I offer a free 30-minute consult, and a lot of therapists do that. And that gives the client an opportunity to come in and see your office, meet you in person, see where you're located, to see if the driving distance is even doable, that kind of thing. And then to ask questions of the therapist. You don't do therapy at a consult, but it gives you a chance to meet the therapist up front and see if you think this is someone you could work with long term. So that's the beginning place. And then after that, while there are always certain things I like to do with couples and certain information I want to get as I'm working with them, it really is kind of a case-by-case process because each client is a little bit different than other clients I've had, even though they may come in with a lot of the same issues. So some of what happens in the counseling room is going to depend on the clients themselves and what they bring in.
I know you said every case is different, but what have you found is the biggest issue that can come up in relation to second marriages?
Children.
And how, I know you also wanted to touch base on a little bit with children, and how do children factor into second marriages? I know this is a topic I discuss pretty much with probably almost every guest we have just because it is so important. But what are ways or steps that you can take to help children deal with second marriages, or should they be brought into marriage counseling as well, or what do you suggest?